Ole Miss takes on Middle Tennessee. The area 42.5-point favorite. We're going to be here with Macon Gillespie with all of the info. This is the Locked On Ole Miss pregame show right here. Stick around.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Rebel Nation. Welcome to the Ole Miss Rebels pregame show. I'm Stephen Willis, a 10-year veteran member of the national media and a former staff member at Ole Miss. I'm here with Macon Gillespie, the publisher of Ole Miss on SI. And between the two of us, we got all the insight and analysis to get you prepped for today's game. Now, Lane Kiffin has been making some noise this week talking about a heavy dose of the run against MTSU. But if we know Lane, that could mean he's ready to air it out and catch us all by surprise. And let's not forget about Jordan Watkins. We're keeping an eye on his potential return today. He could bring some serious firepower to the Ole Miss offense. But the question is, can Ole Miss's defense replicate last week's dominant performance against a theoretically more talented team? Nicholas Vadiato is a very good quarterback for Middle Tennessee State. Gave Missouri all they could handle. Ole Miss is a 42.5-point favorite, but in football, anything can happen. We'll dive into everything you need to know to stay ahead of the game. Stick with us. This is the Locked On Ole Miss Rebels pregame show. We're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Thanks for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day, and a special hello to the insiders and everydayers who make this show what it is. And don't forget to find a second listen on the network. Chris Gordy at Locked On SEC or Corey Burton at Locked On Vandy even gives other perspectives on college football or the SEC or even Ole Miss, honestly. So be sure and check them out as well. Remember, today's game day color is red, so wear red to the ball game. And if you need red, go to College Corner. They're located off Sicily Avenue in Oxford. They can stop off before you get to Vaught Hemingway, and you can dress for success. So, John Macon Gillespie from Ole Miss on SEI is stopping by. It's pretty interesting what is going on this week. Lane Kiffin was completely all in on Ole Miss needs to establish the run. That's been the talking point in the fan base. Ole Miss needs to establish the run. So this means that we can expect Jackson Dart to throw for north of 3 bills in the first half, right?
Right. Yeah, and I do think Lane is right. I mean, to an extent that Ole Miss does need to probably try to run the ball with a little more success than it did last week because they were very pass heavy a week ago. But, I wouldn't be surprised if he is kind of playing a little bit of a side hand there, saying, hey, we're going to try to run the ball, and then Jackson comes out and has a day similar to what he had last week. That wouldn't really surprise me necessarily because Lane is known to kind of do stuff like that. It'll be interesting to see for sure.
He did it last week. If everybody remembers, he said that we're going to come out against Furman and run the ball. That's what we need to do. And then Jackson Dart threw for 420 in the first half. So I'm expecting, honestly, Ole Miss to come out pass happy. And that, John, that makes sense. If you have a quarterback that you think is a legitimate Heisman candidate, it is almost your responsibility to put him in the best shape to perform the best he can. And throwing the football to that group of wide receivers and all that, don't hide him behind a group of running backs. Even though you could probably run the ball up for 250 yards against Middle Tennessee fairly easily, I think, you still want Jackson Dart to have those numbers so that when the snooty media that come in and voting on these things, when they're looking at stats and they're trying to figure out, it's like, well, he only threw for 271 yards and a touchdown against MTSU. What's wrong? You want to avoid that situation because that is something that is going to happen.
Yeah, and I do think with games like this, sometimes voters in those for those awards or in those accolade areas can kind of read too much into it a little bit because I mean you come into this game knowing that Ole Miss is the obviously more talented team than Middle Tennessee State today. And a lot of times teams when they're in that position that Ole Miss is in, just want to get in and get out. Okay, work on some things that you want to work on to get better for when conference play gets here, and just get the win and move on. But it will be interesting to see if he does kind of try to cut Jackson loose a little bit today for that reason, to kind of counteract some of that, saying, okay, well he threw for 420 or however much against Furman, and he did like 375 against Middle Tennessee. So, I mean, it'll be interesting to see for sure.
Yeah, and I'm curious to see what Lane does, honestly, as this goes, because Ole Miss does need. He is right. Ole Miss does need to establish the run just to make the fan base feel better about the running back field at Ole Miss. I mean, if you look at Ole Miss, if you really want to dive into it, whenever I said it was a look test going into an FCS game, that's exactly how the fan base took it. Because if you look at the numbers, every running back, with the exception of Ulysses Bentley, averaged north of 5 yards a carry, but the look didn't look right. And you were playing against Furman, and you expect an explosive level of plays to happen. And because of that, they actually took my advice and they started to worry about it. So we'll see if that looks a little bit differently. I do think in this football game, MTSU is transitioning from a 4-2-5 defense, I think under Tyrone Nix, if anybody wants to blast from the past, into the defensive coordinator they have now, which is a 3-man front defense. They're having to do a lot of transitional players. They didn't have a true nose guard on the roster. They didn't have 3-4 level defensive ends. They have not recruited for that. So they have hit the transfer portal hard, but as it was described to me, it can be a little bit clunky at times. And because of that, I think a running back like Ulysses Bentley has a chance to hit the third level multiple times today.
Yeah, and that would be a really positive thing for Ole Miss, right? Obviously, duh. But yeah, I asked Lane, I think it was on Sunday's media Zoom call thing that we have each week, what his overall assessment of the running back room was against Furman. And he said, he thought they ran well, but he was definitely looking for some improvement there with the running back room and with the offensive line in the run game a little bit as well. That was kind of a challenge to both levels there to kind of buckle down a little bit. So it'll be interesting to see if he does get what he wants out of that this week, because that this is a team that on paper Ole Miss should be able to run the football against.
Theoretically, I'm thinking that Ole Miss has a chance to do pretty well. And the other question that is going to happen out of today's offense is Jordan Watkins going to play? We talked about during the course of the week about whether or not he is going to be able to play. And Lane Kiffin on Reb Talk on Thursday just volunteered that information. Now, this is what everybody needs to realize about Lane Kiffin. When he just volunteers injury information, there's a pretty good chance that it's not completely true. And it's kind of a red herring that they're throwing out to the other team. But we are all on Jordan Watkins' watch. If he is not 100%, honestly, he should not play against Middle Tennessee. He should hold him out until Wake Forest, because you're going to need him to be good against Georgia and into the playoffs more than you're going to need him against MTSU.
Yeah, I think that would be the wise strategy. But I mean, let's say for devil's advocate purposes that Lane wasn't throwing out a red herring on Thursday. He did sound confident or at least optimistic, I should say. That's a better word, that Jordan would potentially be able to play. The way he worded it was interesting to me because he doesn't usually volunteer that kind of information. But if we are able to take his words at face value and take them seriously there, he did sound optimistic that Jordan would potentially be able to play today. Obviously, that would be a really good thing for the Ole Miss wide receiver room. But if he's not able to play, that's not going to be detrimental into the result of this game, in my opinion. If Jordan Watkins not playing today winds up being a problem
Right.
for the Ole Miss offense, something has gone terribly wrong. So
yeah, I'll be on the post-game show with a flamethrower.
Yeah, we'll be on flamethrower watch again. So this isn't something that should be uber concerning. I don't think. I mean, it is a hamstring thing. We did get confirmation on that, but still, I mean, this is not something that should keep Ole Miss fans up at night in regards to Middle Tennessee. Now, if it's an issue when you travel to Baton Rouge or you host Georgia, then you can maybe think a little bit more about it, but not right now.
Can the Rebels defense replicate last week's dominant performance against Furman? Tune in after this break to Locked On Ole Miss as we break down what it will take to keep the momentum going. When you're hiring for your small business, you need to find the right professionals, the people that are truly going to fit your role and help your business grow. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. I've personally used LinkedIn to find some top-notch candidates, and the platform really makes it easy to filter through and find quality people quickly. LinkedIn just isn't another job board. It's a network full of professionals you will not find anywhere else. And what's great is even those who aren't searching actively for a job might see your role and realize, hey, that's what I want to do. Over 70% of LinkedIn users don't even visit other major job sites. So if you're not on LinkedIn, you might be missing out on your best candidates. 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours, and that's fast. And honestly, it's what you need in today's market. If you want to hire like a professional, use LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. We have a new partner on Locked On Ole Miss podcast in the College Corner. It's your one-stop shop for all things Ole Miss. You know, game day is just right around the corner, and game time is just a couple hours away. And you might not have the perfect game day dress or perfect game day shirt. So fans are rocking red. So head on over to College Corner and pick up that perfect game day gear. Whether you're gearing up for football, basketball, or baseball, College Corner has you covered. They're located off of Sisk Avenue, right across from the new Chick-fil-A, getting to the Scores a breeze, and they have plenty of parking. And for those of you out of state, no worries. Visit collegecorner.com, where they turn around orders lightning fast. Trust me, this just isn't a pitch. College Corner is where I get all of my Rebel gear. So visit collegecornerstore.com or stop by College Corner today. College football is back, and it's not too late to catch up before the weekend kicks off. SEC, ACC, Big 10, Big 12 squads, they're on there. The show's released on Thursday. You can check it all. They have the whole stable of Locked On's college football experts talking about the weekend's games. So who has a chance to make the playoffs? Which teams are going to cause the most chaos in their new conferences? Everything you need to know all in one place. Be sure to follow and subscribe to the Locked On College Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. You know, John, it is really interesting that the story after the Ole Miss game last weekend was not Jackson Dart throwing for 420 yards and a half. And just about every other Ole Miss football team, that would have been the story after that Furman game. But the story was how good that defense looked. This is something that they're probably going to be able to replicate, or was that a flash in the pan? What are we looking at?
I personally think it is able to be replicated today. Obviously, competition will see a little bit of an uptick in the weeks ahead, but I do think that this defense can match up pretty well against Middle Tennessee State for sure. 16 tackles for loss last week, if I remember that correctly. I mean, that's insane. Even against an FCS team, and I know there's been talk on social media about, okay, it was Furman, but still,
I mean, 25 years, I think.
Yeah, and if you're playing against air or something, I mean, some of these stats Ole Miss put up is still difficult to do. So I do think that it is somewhat replicable this week. Obviously, I do think Middle Tennessee has a little bit better offense than Furman did or brought to Oxford last week, but I'm a big believer in this defense. Well, yeah, okay, true. But I'm a big believer in this defense. I really am. I have been since really SEC media days and before, I think. I really liked what they had on paper. If they can stay healthy, I really think this is going to be a special unit this year that's going to cause a lot of problems.
You know, a couple of the players that kind of stood out to me against Furman that I'm going to be paying attention to against MTSU, Jaden Kennedy. I thought he played a really good game. He was around the football. I talked to Gary Smith, who is a beat writer for Tulane, and that's where Jaden Kennedy transferred from. He was an all-American Conference player as a true freshman. He blew out his knee, kind of like got hurt in the middle of the season against Memphis. And last season, he was still recovering. But Gary Smith said, hey, if this guy, when he gets healthy, he is going to be one of the better defensive players on your defensive unit. And I was like, okay, you're just doing the homer thing. But he might be right.
Yeah. And I was really impressed with the defensive front in general. I think like looking at it from like how often they were in on, even if it wasn't a tackle for loss, right? How often some of those guys up front were in on plays that just happened really quickly. And a lot of people in the press box last week were kind of on that same page that, um, this front seven especially looks fast. Okay, if that's the proper word, they look like they're difference makers. Um,
They look like Alabama and Georgia front sevens.
just to put it bluntly, yeah. I mean, uh, so I mean, it'll be interesting to see if that level of success continues. I think it personally will this week, and we'll see. But I think that this defense has the pieces to continue to be pretty special as the year goes on.
Yeah, I think so as well, and we'll see exactly how they handle that. What are some other players like? We know about Walter Nolan and we know about Princely and Mommy Ellen, which he played a lot more against Furman than probably Ole Miss fans were expecting. And my gut was, and I should have stayed on this. My gut was after spring, if his shoulder was going to make him miss significant game time, which was the plan whenever everybody said that was what they were reporting, he would have had the surgery in the middle of spring because they showed last spring they didn't care about it. All they care about the meeting times. The fact that he waited to not miss a rep in spring to have his surgery, I should have known he was going to be back.
Yeah, and he even sounded kind of confident about that, right?
Mm.
Too. I mean, he in his first media availability, I'm pretty sure it was in the fall, kind of the early portions of fall camp. He said he didn't anticipate missing any games, and that was kind of different than what most of us thought at the time.
Mhm.
We kind of thought he'd miss the first 3 or 4 weeks potentially, which I mean it wouldn't be a massive issue because of who's on Ole Miss's schedule, but still, he was like, "No, I don't think I'm going to miss any games." And so far he's right, and
Mhm.
he looked pretty good against Furman, and did play more snaps than even I anticipated.
So, what is the weather looking like in Oxford, Mississippi for people traveling up to the ball game today?
Well, it's like you and I were talking about before we started this thing, man. It is nice according to the electronic weather reports that I have on my phone. I actually haven't stepped outside yet today. I'll be doing that here shortly. But according to what I've seen, it looks like a high in the 80s today, low 80s, and that's going to be around kickoff. And sky looks good. I mean, it's going to be partly cloudy, I think, probably. Uh, but that may kind of dissipate, and I think it's going to be pretty nice, especially for an early September game in Mississippi.
Up next, we break down our final thoughts on the Ole Miss showdown with Middle Tennessee, the Blue Raiders. Did the Rebels do enough to handle business today, or are the key takeaways heading into next week? Is that going to be the more important thing from this game? Stay tuned for all the insights. Game Time is the place to get your Ole Miss tickets. With last minute killer deals, all in prices, views from receipts, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying Ole Miss tickets. There's not a bad seat in Vaught Hemingway Stadium. There's just not. But Game Time allows you to check out the view from that seat whenever you buy tickets before you get them. They have the lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection, job loss protection, all of the customer service bells and whistles that will give you what you want. Take the guesswork out of buying Ole Miss tickets with Game Time. And with this being the most anticipated season in Ole Miss football history, I might be able to help you out with tickets as well. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Lowest prices, last minute tickets, guaranteed. So, John, we have some final thoughts going in there. Now, my prediction, and you can tell me what the predictions kind of were on the Locked On SI site. You do predictions every week, just like basically everybody does. But You can tell me yours. Mine, I have 52-7. I have Ole Miss covering this massive line. Ole Miss is favored by 42.5 points. That is exactly the same number that they were favored against Furman, if anybody is keeping track. And it is the largest line that I can remember Ole Miss being favored in against an FBS opponent.
Yeah, we're all kind of in that same vein of thought as well. I think everybody had Ole Miss covering this line except maybe one. I'll have to go back and check for sure, but we're all in the like 50 to 60 point range for Ole Miss and anywhere between 3 and 10 points for Middle Tennessee, I believe. Um, yeah, I think that pretty much everybody's on the same boat that this is going to be a pretty dominating game again for Ole Miss. It may not look exactly the same as last week did, but then again, it could in a lot of ways. I think Ole Miss scores early and often in this thing and puts it away by halftime, probably like it did last week.
I think the one thing that Ole Miss fans should be necessarily concerned about now, I do not think Middle Tennessee State is going to pose much of a threat on the scoreboard. I think the end result, I think the only question is whether or not Ole Miss covers. And a 42.5 point line with the new clock rules in college football. If MTSU can script together an opening drive, if they win the toss and put together a 6-minute drive that results in a touchdown, covering could be problematic. But even at that point, you're looking at probably 45-7. I mean, it's not going to change that much. But with the new clock rules and this being an absurdly high line, that is concerning.
Yeah, it is. I always on lines like this, I always struggle laying the points, I think, in my mind. Like I'm not really a gambler or whatever, but like in my mind, I struggle to kind of lay those points because it is a lot. And so Ole Miss could win this game convincingly and not cover, right? I mean, that's just kind of how this sets up. But my gut right now tells me they do cover. Actually, I think they do cover that 42.5 or whatever it's going to end up being by 3:15 today. I think they cover that, and I could be wrong. I've been wrong a bunch of times before, but if last week's offensive performance paired with the defensive performance taught me anything, it's that I think this team can be pretty legit, and I think they're gonna try to repeat that this week.
Yeah, how about Ole Miss wearing powder red gray in a game against Middle Tennessee?
Well, Stephen, this is my heaven, right?
Yeah.
My heaven on earth. You had somebody on your show this week talk about Middle Tennessee's uniforms, correct?
Yes, they're going white helmets, white jerseys, blue pants.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a really solid look
Mhm.
against one another in Oxford today. In my opinion, this is Ole Miss's best uniform combination. You can go 1A, 1B with this or the Navy helmets with this jersey and pant combination. But I think this is Ole Miss's best look that they're running out today. And I'm really excited to see it. I would kind of prefer to see it in an SEC game. Since Vanderbilt's not on the schedule, this was usually the combination kind of reserved for Vanderbilt sometimes in the last couple of years.
Which is weird, right?
Yeah, it is. Of course, Ole Miss has done the powder helmet, navy jersey, gray pants for the Chucky Mullins thing with Vanderbilt too. But with Vanderbilt not on the schedule, they have to throw it in somewhere, I think, and I guess they opted to do it, this week. But I kind of would have liked to have seen it in an SEC game. Maybe we'll get lucky and they'll wear navy red gray at LSU in Baton Rouge. But I'm not holding my breath on that.
Yeah. Mark Walsh asked the question, is like, what does it take for us to actually get the national media's radar attention? I mean, we won 76-0 and hardly any discussion. Another 76-0 beatdown. I'm tired of hearing about Tennessee and Colorado. One interesting question is Brett Murphy dropped Ole Miss. Preseason, Ole Miss had Ole Miss 6th. Ole Miss wins 76-0 and in the most dominating fashion, basically in the week, and he dropped them from 6 to 10. That is the type of bias that Ole Miss is dealing with when it comes to the national media. They're so reactionary, and if they warrant anything, any narrative that's out there, they're going to play that along.
Yeah, and I do think a lot of things in different pockets of the national media are very narrative driven. I will say that. Part of the reason that maybe Ole Miss isn't getting as much steam this week is because it was against an FCS team. I can't really say one way or the other on that. But I do think that as a whole, the voters in the AP poll, outside of a couple, noticeable outliers, are still kind of buying the Rebels right now. I did think it was interesting that Notre Dame leapfrogged Ole Miss in the AP poll because I think Ole Miss is better than Notre Dame.
But honestly, that was the most predictable thing that could have happened this weekend. Notre Dame winning and going into the top 5, whether or not they deserve it or not. The AP poll, they love Notre Dame, and that's been case for 100 years.
Yeah, and I didn't get to see any of that game between Notre Dame and A&M really because I was in the post-game press conference and everything and in the press box and stuff. But the way it kind of played out, I think Ole Miss is better than Notre Dame. We'll just have to see. But from what Notre Dame could have kind of a almost a golden road path to the playoff now a little bit because they got through College Station. So we'll have to see kind of how that goes. But I do think Ole Miss is the more talented team when it comes down to it. So, but yeah, I do think that the national landscape as a whole. The majority is bought into Ole Miss being pretty good, but there will be some noticeable outliers as things go ahead.
It's just the people that want to be the smartest person in the room. You can always tell. There's always 5 to 10 of them that want to be contrarian and the smartest person in the room, and because of that, Ole Miss becomes an easy target. I mean, like I said, you can set your watch by it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it does play out like that a lot. I mean, it really does. And the Colorado narrative, to me, I don't want to get on a Colorado soapbox here, but I am kind of exhausted with that. I think my Twitter or X posts over the last couple of weeks have kind of indicated that I'm kind of exhausted by that. It's gotten old.
Listen, if you want a real concern about the Colorado narrative, I think there's a real chance outside the definite best player in college football ends up as Jackson Dart. He has 4,500 yards passing, 50 touchdowns, just unbelievable numbers, and Travis Hunter wins the Heisman. We could have a Charles Woodson situation.
Yeah, it's possible because and don't get me wrong, I think Travis Hunter, I even think Shedeur Sanders is a good player. Yeah. I think they're good players, but I've actually thought Shedeur Sanders was a pretty good quarterback even during his Jackson State days. But anyway, I don't buy it right now. The team as a whole is just not good, in my opinion, and I'm kind of tired of pretending like they are.
We kind of all are. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your go-to source for Ole Miss sports. We pride ourselves on offering the most comprehensive perspectives out there, which is why we're the #1 Ole Miss podcast. We support your support means the world to us. Thank you for making us your first listen. Now go check out Locked On College Football podcast for your second one. From NIL deals to the never-ending conference realignment rumors, Spencer McLaughlin will get you ready for an exciting season on the gridiron. You can find the link down to Locked On College Football in the description. So you don't even need to search. As part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And also exciting news. You can now become a Locked On Ole Miss Insider, the best and easiest way to stay updated on all things Ole Miss sports. It's our texting program. We send you notifications on everything relevant. And during game days, we also look around the country when anything interesting happens. We'll comment on that as well. Enjoy a 14-day free trial and experience the future of college sports coverage. We're adding new perks as we grow, so do not miss out. The link is down in the description. For those of you watching on YouTube, enjoy the game today. And everybody, enjoy the game today. Be safe heading up to Oxford. And, of course, wear red. And if you don't have red, go to College Corner. They'll hook you up. Hotty toddy, everyone.